21 league games played, just 17 to go. Whether or not there's enough blood pressure tablets and medication for Hearts fans, if the remaining fixtures are like that one at Dens Park, I'm not so sure. Talk about being put through the ringer. Hello, and welcome to episode 384 of Gloves Around the Funnel, the podcast dedicated to our handsome bastard of a goalkeeper, Craig Gordon, and also to Scottish Premiership leaders, Heart of Midlothian. I'm Mark Donaldson, and a win is a win. But some wins are bigger than others. The best 3 points of the season, according to Derek McIntosh after the 1-0 win over Dundee at Dens Park. And I doubt that Scott McIntosh is going to argue with that. Hello.
Uh, no, definitely not. I think that's a game we might all be looking back on very fondly come the end of the season. I think I've even seen Celtic and Rangers supporters refer to it as that's a game you win when you go in to win a league. That type of fixture when it's backs against the wall for 45 minutes. And it's amazing how different a 1-0 win can be observed and viewed through the lenses of the same supporters only 1 week apart. I think there was a bit of frustration regarding our inability to control proceedings in the second half last week, but it's mentally think just how differently fans are feeling about today. That was definitely a gritty performance from the team, and everyone contributed. Some more so than others, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But it was really good to get that 1-0 at the end. It was a really big 3 points. And McInnes has said himself recently, sometimes 1-0's enough, and that happened to be the case today. But we might have to sign on our centre half because we're getting to a stage where we're going to need somebody just a bit more cover on the bench. We're ending the game with the five centre halves there, but yeah, it was really enjoyable ultimately in the end, and we got the 3 points, which is all we needed.
Dave McPherson and Alan McLaren were next up if we suffered another injury. A random Celtic fan by the name of Paul tweeted, Hearts doing exactly what we've been doing for so many years, grinding out results, whether it's 1-0 or 3-2, they get it done. Going to be a hard task to win this title. Somebody else like Scott, who was at Dens Park and saw it firsthand, providing the words for your pictures if you watched the game on Hearts TV. Hello, Mr. Laurie Dunsire.
Hello, Mark. It's nice to be on. I'm just back in the last hour or two from Dens. Had some dinner. Not had a chance to watch much back. Of course, I've watched two incidents a few times. One being Claudio Braga's goal, which I think the BBC report from my former colleague Andrew Petrie mentioned the fact that he kind of got gazumped by the person who replaced him, just Craig Gordon, because everyone's talking about that save rather than what was a fine finish. But it's funny. I at halftime I was speaking to the Sky crew over to our right in the scaffolding. That was Gary Weaver, commentator, and our very own Ryan McGowan doing co-coms. And I mentioned mainly to Gary because he obviously doesn't watch Hearts every week and doesn't watch maybe Derek McInnes' side every week. I said, this is set up for Derek McInnes, this current scenario. And I highlighted the fact to him and Ryan. I was like, think back to last season, Kilmarnock Hearts, Kilmarnock down to 10 men right at the start of the game. And I said, don't be surprised if we just play four centre backs. And he actually went one more, as Mark points out. He went five in the end. But that game, I don't know if I think Scott was at the game. You probably would have watched it, Mark. That game at Rugby Park, we had a man up for pretty much 90 minutes when you include injury time. And there was a point in the second half where you just knew Hearts weren't going to score. And actually, Dundee came closer because I don't think we even tested the goalkeeper properly. But there was a point in the second half where McInnes just lined them up and went, keep getting the ball out wide, keep crossing it if you want, but we're just going to keep
Yeah.
defending it. And it was almost at that point. We defended brilliantly, and obviously we're reliant on one incredible player to do one big, incredible save to keep it that way. But I think that is a massive win. It's almost better than if been 11v11 and we'd maybe got a 2-0 routine win. That I think says a lot that we managed to dig in and get a victory from that position, being a man down against an informed Dundee side for half the game.
I was going against myself just before Craig's save and kind of thinking, what should the title of this be? But then thinking, don't think about it yet. The points aren't in the bag. And I was thinking Perfect 10. I was thinking Castle Rock because the Hearts song, our defense is as strong as the old Castle Rock. But the title of this episode simply has to be Craig fucking Gordon. because of that save and how it all came about. So we did this in the summer ahead of his testimony. What's your best ever save? And he still reckons, I spoke to him earlier, he still reckons that it's the save from Jason Holt away at Livingston. However, who does he think he is, knowing his best save? We can decide our best saves for Craig Gordon from this list. Playing for Hearts, David Clarkson against Motherwell, Ryan Porteous against Hibernian, Rob Jones against Hibernian, Willie Gibson, the deflected free kick against Partick Thistle in the Scottish Cup quarter-final in 2006, the Jason Holt stunner, he also had a triple save at Livingston, or Emile Aqua against Dundee. Rather than rating them 1 through 6, I just want to ask the boys, where are you putting that save today against Emile Aqua in that group? Scotty, you can start.
Roy goes in at number 3 for me just now,
Okay.
but that could change to number 1 depending on
If we win the
how the
league.
season pans out. I think it probably goes somewhere behind Rob Jones and David Clarkson's efforts. But look, people could make the argument that given his lack of game time, the fact that this saves 20 years on for the other two I'm just mentioning there could be context to maybe say why that is his best save in a Hearts jersey. But for me just now, it's still number 3. I think Laurie mentioned a little bit before we started the pod about recency bias, and sometimes there is a little bit of that when you start looking at these lists. But number 3 just now, but could easily go to number 1 by the end of the season.
He's 43 years old, Laurie. And when I was 43, my knees spoke to me more than my wife did. Things happen to men in their 40s. You think you've finished when you go for a pee. You've not. It's like, hello, I'm back. And you're like, no. Being a middle-aged man in their 40s, you shouldn't be dashing around. As you and Murray said, I'm just surprised he didn't hold it. Um, where are you putting that save in the pantheon of Craig Gordon's greatest saves?
It's a tricky one. I think Scott's alluding to it there that context around it will probably ultimately define it in terms of like if Hearts win this league and they win it by less than 3 points, then people will probably refer back to that save. And I think the context as well that he is 43 now. He's not played a club game this season. This is came on unprepared effectively at the end of the first half. And to be honest, I know it wasn't a particularly spectacular save, but even to be his first touch with a save, which is quite a.
Yeah.
I know it was quite close to him, but it'd be very easy for a goalkeeper to make a mess of that when he's not been tested. He's barely had a warm up, so I think that's your credit to him for that as well. I'm kind of with Scott. I'm probably going to give a bit more recency bias and say right now it's pushing the number 1 spot. I'm looking at it in front of me right now a few times again, and he does have to adjust slightly. And I love the pictures of Claudio Braga looking absolutely stunned watching it, and that was the
Isn't
same.
that great?
Honestly, up on the scaffolding, I'll call it scaffolding. It's meant to be the commentary gantry. When it saved, I had my head in my hands and looked around, and everyone was doing the same thing. The Hearts analysts, the Dundee analysts, everyone was shaking their head in their hands, like, how was that not gone in? And you see Aqua starting to celebrate. He's peeling away, and to be honest. My head was on my head. My head was on top. My hands were on top of my head because I thought Dundee scored. When the header came in, I was like,
Yeah.
"That's 1-1. That's 1-1." I was so sure. I already had my head in my hands, and then I looked around and was like,
Aqua's got every right to turn away and celebrate because
Of
he does
course.
everything right.
"He's got
He
decent
heads
pace
it into
on
the
it.
ground
Aye,
as far
it
into
should
the
be a
corner as
goal."
he possibly could. There's a really good picture that's now starting to circulate on social media where there's an elderly Dundee fan behind the goal.
Oh,
He's
he's celebrating, isn't he?
he's got his hands in there. Like
Yeah.
the only person that wasn't celebrating or commiserating at that stage was Craig Gordon, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, I know at that point, given how well he got contact on it, I was just expecting that to go in.
Yeah. So
It's the noise, Laurie, and I don't know what it was like for you commentating on it, but watching it at home, and I watched the Hearts TV coverage today. I prefer Dunsire to McGowan because Dunsire's made the effort to join us today, and McGowan hasn't. Um, but there literally was a goal noise from the Dundee fans, and then it's a kind of, it's like a sharp intake of breath, and it's the angle, it's the Sky Sports angle from behind the goal that shows it's illegal. He shouldn't be allowed to have done that, and he has. It was a sensational save, but there was a reason why he was playing and why he was on the field because he didn't start the game in goal. So when we come back, we'll take a look at the Hearts lineup. We will delve into the left back issue right now, the team selection at Dens, and everything that happened during Dundee against Hearts that resulted in Hearts playing the second half with 10 men after Alexander Schwallow was sent off just before the break. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. Dundee nil, Hearts 1. Fair bit of talk on the message boards, and messages were sent on WhatsApp during the week. Oh, Harry Milne might be out for the season. When that message went around, Derek McIntosh had already done his press conference for the game. So it wasn't a case of ask him the next time we see him, because that was Dens Park. So he was asked pre-game, and he said he'd rolled his ankle in training inside at the Orium, and he hoped it wasn't too serious, but he'd be sent for a scan, and we would see. So the obvious thing was, okay, Stephen Kingsley comes in. But in the second to last drill that Hearts did on Friday, which was at Tynecastle, they were doing free kick drills. Stephen Kingsley tweaked his groin, and they decided not to take a risk. So, Scott McIntosh, we ended up with Jamie McCart coming into play. And when you saw the lineup, without knowing what the formation was, were you thinking it was a 4-4-2, a 4-3-3, a 4-2-3-1? Or were you thinking because McCart came in that maybe Hearts were going to play three at the back?
Yeah, I think just before I mention the lineup, I'll give a shout out to the bedwetters on Kickback who had been organising Harry Milne's funeral, I think, since like Thursday or Friday. Like honestly, some of the wild rumours that were going around regarding his the extent of his injury, I felt it made sense bringing McCart in. It made sense from the viewpoint of having Altena in the team. I just felt it would probably shift to a back three when we were in possession. It would maybe actually give Altena a bit more license to roam, knowing that we kind of could just shift somebody along into that position and sort of almost play as a free when we were in attack. The rest of the team, I thought, kind of picked itself. I done a video with Craig Cairns the other day for the Standard, and he asked me the question about Chesnikov, and for me, I think that we're getting to a stage where I would like to see us get back to a 4-2-4 with either Kurjota or Chesnikov on the right, because I think that Claudio Braga's game has been stifled somewhat, being taken out into a wider role. So I would like to see that happen, but I did feel that he would stick with Magnuson out in that wide right position. I think there would be a concern about what Dundee could offer from set plays. And I think he also felt that it just gave us a bit more protection in front of Altena as well. So there wasn't really any huge shocks on top of the injury news for me.
Laurie, Jamie McCart was praised afterwards, along with Craig Gordon, by Derek McInnes as someone that trains every single day like he's going to play. There's never a let off, and that made it easy for the gaffer, according to him, to play Jamie McCart because he's a true professional. What about his selection? Was it a surprise for you, or was it a case of, well, who else could play there?
Yeah, probably it's probably somewhere in between because I don't think at any point early in the weekend I would have thought that Jamie McCart would be starting as a left fullback in the game against Dundee. I think most people thought it'd be Milne, and then worst case scenario, it's Stephen Kingsley. But I think he's there because he's left-footed, basically. I thought he'd maybe played left back more, and while I think he has come on in that position from the bench before, I know transfer market isn't gospel, but it gets a lot right, and I couldn't find a left back starting role for Jamie McCart recorded since 2018 when he's an Inverness player.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think what didn't surprise me about it is our manager, and Derek McInnes was quite happy to play four centre backs across the back four when he was at Kilmarnock. So I think in some ways it made sense. I did think like Scott, it would have that sort of it would have the kind of slightly imbalanced approach where Altona would get forward a lot and we'd kind of slot into a three. It actually looked less of that than I thought it would. Kind of watching them quite a lot often, they were often holding quite an even line. But obviously Altona's got more natural width going forward. On that right hand side, we didn't have anyone really naturally to go wide because it was Magnuson out there or Braga sometimes dropping into position. Whereas on the left, it's Kizaridis who while he does like to cut in. He does like to go wide quite often. So I think in the circumstances it made sense. But I think you've got to credit Jamie McCart both from a being able to perform similar to Craig Gordon without having much match time to go by, because as much as you keep yourself fit and you train, there's not quite that same competitive edge that you get from playing in games that you need for that focus to be kind of sharp and on it. So I think he did really well considering that, and considering he was out of position. And he just seems like a really true professional, I think, considering that's his first start of the season. He's come off the bench, I think, 6 times before this. And every time we've asked him to come on and do a job, be it 2 minutes at the end, be it a full game this time, or be it maybe 15, 20 minutes, I think he's always looked kind of on his game. And I think I like Jamie McCart. I think Stuart Finley's done excellently, and I wouldn't want him to go out of the team for any reason. But if he did, I don't think it would be a disaster if you've got McCart and Halkett in there. I think he's proven himself even last season in a pretty poor Hearts team. I think on the whole he was pretty solid. So yeah, full credit to him. And I think it's a big part of what we're going to need the second half of the season. We've got a great starting 11 and maybe the two or three above that who regularly get on and get involved. But we're going to need the Jamie McCarts, and obviously the Craig Gordon, as we've noticed as well. And there's probably going to be a few other players that we're going to need at some point due to suspension or injury or just need to rotate. So I think that's the big task for McInnes, a squad of 30 getting into the second half of the season, keeping people happy and being able to call upon them when they're needed and get a performance out of them.
It's a really good point. Hearts are not going to win the league by being the best team to watch, the prettiest team to watch, the best footballing team to watch. But I cannot see any other team that are going to be more determined as a unit and work harder than this Hearts side. And if we win it, magnificent. If we don't, pretty much guarantee you it won't be for the want of trying. And everything that Laurie has just said there about keeping everybody happy when they're not playing and then they come in. And look, it was a slow start, Scott. I knew we were recording tonight, just a few hours after the game, so I took some notes. Well, I say some notes. Created nothing in first 10 minutes. Shankland first touch not until 13th minute. Created nothing in first 20 minutes. They had a chance inside 60 seconds, the big lad from the back. Maybe should have done better with a header. Are you concerned at all that when we get going, then great, but some games we take our time to get going?
Not overly. I think the pattern of that first half up until the red card was going the way that I felt it might have done. A bit similar to Kilmarnock. I think there's games like this where, and I think Derek McInnes knows fine well, you've got to win your battles first. You've got to make sure that you're not giving away anything silly. If you get one or two half chances in the first half, you do your best to try and take at least one of them, which we did. And then it's a case of in the second half being that better version of Hearts where it's more about hitting them on the transition, hitting them on the counter attack, and trying to add one or two goals onto that. I'll be completely honest, up until the red card, that's how I thought the game was going to pan out. I thought that from the Braga moment onwards, we were the better side in that first half. And I felt like it was only a matter of time before we got a second goal, and potentially a third. It just felt like it had that sort of feeling to it. Obviously, the narrative changes as soon as the red card happens, and we've got to fight and scrap for it in the second half. But Dundee were competitive in the first half. They're obviously a threat from set plays, from long throws, like a lot of teams are now well versed in doing now. But generally speaking, I thought we were okay. I thought we were reasonably comfortable without being good on the ball. That was a frustration. But again, I think some of that comes from being lopsided as a starting 11, then having Magnuson kind of playing that wide right but tucking in position as well. And let's be honest, I don't want to over egg it today, but Magnuson had a bit of a stinker, did he?
Yeah, yeah.
I think the fact that he's 6 foot something was the only reason he remained on the pitch as long as he did. He played like he was concussed. I'm going to be completely honest with
Wow.
you. But we got away with it, we got away with that, but we certainly weren't great on the ball. But I think that would have changed second half if we'd stuck to 11 men. I think Dundee would have eventually had to have come out a little bit more, and I think we would have picked them off. Because to be fair, we had a couple of chances to do that even in the second half with 10 men. And I think if we'd kept the likes of Braga and that on, I think it would have been far more comfortable than it ended up being.
Okay, I want to kind of do this in real time for Hearts' opening goal. It's the 27th minute. It's after a decent save from Alex Schwalm, nothing that you would expect him to be beaten by. Ball's played forward. Cammy Devlin is fouled by Finn Robertson. And he's fouled probably midway inside his own half. There's a talking to from the referee for Robertson. Cammy, having seen the ball be kicked away, asks for the ball to come back, then takes the free kick from the edge of the centre circle. It's played forward, Shankland to Braga, back of the net. 26 and a half minutes gone. Hearts take the lead. Immediately, Dundee players complain. So, what were they complaining about? And how much of this were you aware of at the time, Laurie, when you were commentating? Was it, do you think, that the ball was moving, or was it that it was clearly taken from the wrong part of the field?
100% sure because at the time the feeling was where we were that it might have been because the ball was moving. That was certainly the signal from I'm kind of beside the analysts and then next along is the Sky crew, so I have to kind of really try and peer around to see the Sky guys. So I often try and look at what the analysts are looking at and what their reaction is, and they all seem to be making the ball is moving motion is what people might be complaining at. But I know in having seen a clip of the goal back from the Sky highlights that they were talking about it being from the position. It could be either. Um, I, I feel like it's one of these, if it either scenario for me, it's one of those where no one really gets bothered by it too much if nothing happens from that free kick. Now, Cammy Devlin, when you watch it, he puts the ball down, it's moving slightly, and it seems to come to a stop just as he hits it. Was it still moving as he hit it? I think you would need to have a very zoomed in camera and look at it kind of frame by frame, which is kind of getting into, well, does it really matter at that point? Um, from the position, yeah, he's maybe, I don't think he's as far forward as maybe some had made out, but he's certainly a little bit further forward, but he's inside his own half. And I feel like most of the time players get away with that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but same with throw-ins. Throw-in gets given 10 yards up the line, they go and take it. A few people complain, but it's never made a big deal of. It's only when someone goes and scores at the end of it. And I think we were on the end of one last season with Aberdeen, and I didn't really make a massive deal of it at the time because it's one of those where Aberdeen had the free kick miles inside their own half, and it was a whole move that transpired after it. So it felt like, yes, maybe you could claim that, but are you kind of clutching at straws? It's not the final ball that's been played through at that point. Obviously Devlin's is kind of a bit more influential, so I'm probably trying to circumnavigate saying that there might have been a problem with the free kick, that it's one of those things that just tends to go in a game of football. Um, and it's only given an issue because we've got VAR these days and they want you to go back and look at everything. But I think it would have been a bit of a travesty to start disallowing a goal because you review a free kick and either we've seen the ball moved slightly as he kicked it, or it was taken 5 yards away from where it was meant to have been taken. Would be my feeling, but hey, maybe I'd think differently if it was a goal for Dundee.
That's the thing. I mean, the one thing I can say is that I'm consistent on this type of issue because I remember the conversation we all had at the 3-2 game against Aberdeen last season, and my problem with it was not around the refereeing, and it was something I got a bit of stick for, but I had an issue with Hearts' inability to react to that situation. And I think ultimately, if Dundee are being true to themselves, that's something where they need to ask, why were they so passive in that moment? You've got to be switched on. As soon as that foul gets given, you know that there's a likelihood that a free kick could be given and taken maybe not so many yards as front as that, but you see it happen all the time where teams will take a free kick and it'll be a few yards away from where it's supposed to be. So I think more needs to be questioned on Dundee's inability to react to that, probably rather than the officiating. And again, I can say that with a degree of consistency after having the exact same problem with the Hearts team just over 12 months ago.
hmm And I think I'm right in saying, I might be wrong, but I think I'm right in saying VAR can't get involved in something like that. I think it has to be the referee
Yeah,
that is on the field and says, okay, once the goal's awarded, you're not going back. If you
Yeah.
haven't stopped it at the time, once that play is started, that's why they stop play if there's a contentious incident. If VAR wants to check it and they don't allow play to restart until it's been properly checked. Once that ball is played from the free kick, the only person that can stop that and say, no, get back, is the referee. I'm sure there was something similar with regards to the ball movement, as Laurie mentioned. It might have been that as well. This will test you, Scott. See if you've uploaded this one. It wasn't the Scott Crabbe goal against Rangers because that was open play in 91, but I'm sure there was something against Celtic that Hearts maybe were on the good end of back in the 90s. There was definitely something, but as you say,
God.
it happened last season as
Yeah.
well. You play to the whistle. What about the finish from Claudio Braga and where he was positioned today in this formation?
It's probably hard to judge his overall performance because he's only on the pitch 45 minutes. I think he gets a little bit fortunate with the first touch that he takes because it kind of it's a bit of an awkward first touch, but it puts it in the path for him. But I think it's a really good reaction to that. It's a really good finish, and it's, dare I say, very different to what we've seen from Claudio Braga up to this point. I mean, we've seen a player who's not afraid to have a pop at goal from all areas, but majority of his goals have been very poacher-like, headers, reacting well to situations in and around the box. That was a really good finish. That was a more a finish that you'd expect from Shankland, to be fair, in terms of being so accurate. Because there's not a lot of power in the shot. It's all about making sure that you're getting the accuracy there, which beats McCracken. So it was a really good finish, and bit unfortunate for him that he couldn't build on that going into the second half. But ultimately, it's a winning contribution.
It's a lovely finish, but I also, Laurie, want to highlight Lawrence Shankland's part in this one. He, for me, is so key and integral to the way that Hearts have played this season. And this isn't him just waiting for someone to maybe give him the ball. This is him going looking for it, being alert, taking it from the free kick from Cammy Devlin in a position that isn't a forward's position. It's probably a number eight, a midfielder's position. He knows he has a wee look around him. There's nobody there. So he's like, give me the ball. And he's aware of the runs and he thinks that Claudio Braga's made the best run. Great pass, but Lawrence Shankland's part in this one goes down as an assist, but this for me kind of sums up Lawrence Shankland with Hearts this season. Maybe not always the star. Braga's got goals, Kizaridis has got goals, Shankland's obviously got 10, but someone who's just been a big part, and he was with this goal.
Yeah, but he thinks the chance is gone. I don't know if you see, he puts his head in his hands after the pass
He
because he
does.
thinks the Dundee defender's got there. But no, I mean, I think Lawrence Shankland is brilliant when he's playing in that role, and I think I've said it so many times. It's one of those things that I underestimated about him. I didn't see Shankland as a top flight player with Dundee United. I just saw highlights of him when he was Ayr United, and I saw clips of him in goals when he was in the Championship with United. Then obviously Hearts and United kind of crossed paths as Hearts went down, and then he went off to Belgium. So I'll admit I never watched a lot of full Lawrence Shankland games because it tended to be in divisions that Hearts weren't playing, so it was just in highlights and goal clips. So a few people who aren't Hearts fans now make that mistake, and I have to kind of correct them that Shankland's not a poacher. This is not his game. He's a great finisher, but actually his best game is holding it in, is dropping deep, is creating as well, and it's his intelligence. And I think one of the problems last season, apart from the fact I don't think his head was in the right place and he lost confidence, but one of the problems we were relying on him to try and be that man to be up there and score goals, but also he wanted to then drop in and try and make things because no one was doing that. So he's trying to do two roles, but with Claudio Braga in there and also players cutting in like Kizaridis, he has support, so he can drop in, and it doesn't necessarily take away from Hearts in that final third. Because often in our worst spells in the last year or two, it's been because Shanklin's trying to drop into the midfield position, and then he looks ahead, and well, there's no one to pass to because the only player who's usually up there is Lawrence Shankland. Whereas now you've got Braga up there, so I think that's a huge thing for him is to have Claudio Braga as the foil, and I think that's why Scott made a good point about our shape. Now we can't do it in every game. It's gonna be tough matches where we have to maybe readjust, for playing Rangers or Celtic, especially away, or maybe another tough away game. We can't do it all the time, but certainly in the likes of, maybe St Mirren at home coming up, I would like to see us trying to get back to that 4-4-2, 4-2-4 shape, with Braga and Shankland kind of more together. I know Braga kind of sits behind them and Magnuson drops to the right, but it's not quite a partnership at times. And I think if you've got Chesnikov cutting in from the right, you've got Kizaridis on the left, potentially fullbacks being able to overlap. I think that allows us to maybe start getting into more dominant positions in games. Because, today was great. And I think for me, it's the type of game, that's what champions do, isn't it? They grind out wins like that in those circumstances. But you can't do that every week. It'll always come back to haunt you if you keep playing games in that way every week. So I'm hoping on Wednesday and maybe the cup game and in some other kind of games, especially at home, we can see more of that kind of let's overload teams, let's get us on the ball all the time, and let's get those attacking players involved. Because as much as Shankland and Braga did brilliantly in that moment, we didn't see nearly enough of them for a lot of the game. And granted, there's a big caveat in the second half as to why that happened for the second
Mhm.
45.
So 1 minute of added time is indicated. And we'll try and clear a couple of things up and get the boys' thoughts on other things as well. You cannot be offside from a goal kick, but this was not a goal kick. McCracken has played it, whether it's a free kick or whether it's from open play. It wasn't a goal kick. It wasn't played from the edge of his 6 yard box. So that then brings in the possibility of the player who it's intended to go to, who flicks it on, potentially being offside. Then the player flicks it on. Is there an offside against the other Dundee player? So bearing in mind the time here, we're seconds away from the end of the first half. And we kind of get caught out a little bit. Swallow comes out of his area, whether the ball holds up a little bit, not sure. The conditions weren't great, but he's definitely committed a foul here. The flag goes up from the former Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross, MSP, on the Derry side opposite the main stand. And when the offside is awarded, Derek McInnes thinks, okay, I'll get a head start. I will head down towards the tunnel to get back into the changing room. But then the play isn't allowed to resume because VAR says we need to check this. If this isn't offside, this could be the denial of a goal scoring opportunity and a potential red for the goalkeeper. So, Scott McIntosh, did the officials get this one correct?
I think they ultimately do. I think before we talk about the officials, I have to say I'm quite disappointed in Stuart Finlay. I think Stuart Finlay's far too complacent with that initial. In fact, he really doesn't even go up for the challenge with the Dundee forward because I think in his mind he's well offside. So he kind of doesn't even make much of an effort on it. Now, that one's a contentious offside one. Again, you want to talk about VAR and its constraints with the cameras in terms of number of cameras and positioning of cameras at places like Dens Park. I don't know if you really get that comprehensive a sort of viewpoint on it, but I think you've just got to put your trust in it, and I'm sure Hearts will have benefited from it at some stage over the last couple of seasons as well. So my bigger issue with it is the Stuart Finlay one. The second sort of phasey play where Hay runs onto it, he's well onside. Like he's definitely well onside. So that was never a contentious moment. And then the decision he Swallow he comes and commits. He doesn't even really go in with his feet. He kind of stumbles and just sort of throws his body towards it. To me, that's a red card. I think you've got to try and put yourself in the situation of if that happens at the other end, what are you screaming for? And I think we're all
Yeah.
screaming for a red card. There's this sort of issue around how people interpret a goal scoring opportunity. Now, to me, I get that Halkett had sort of filled back in, and there might even be an argument that a second defender was there. If the goalkeeper is taken out the game and a forward has got the ball in the penalty box with only one defender to beat, that's a goal scoring opportunity.
Yep.
So I just think I know some people they get caught up with last man. I think some people
Last
mistake
man's
goal
not
scoring
existed in the
opportunities
laws
last
for
man, which has never been a
God knows how
rule,
many
but
years.
it's something that just seems to go through generations of
Yeah.
football supporters. They all sort of buy into it. I just think it's a red card. And look, maybe I'm not looking at it so bluntly if we don't get the right result today, but again, taking my Hearts hat off, I think most football fans would be wanting a red card in that situation. And I think they ultimately get there to the right decision. My only potential bony contention would be that first contact with the header, where the camera's positioned. I just don't think it gives you a very good viewpoint of that. But I think Celtic had a similar issue last year at Fir Park, where an
Yeah.
offside gets given against Celtic at Fir Park, and it because of where the camera's positioned, it was very hard to tell whether it was the right call or not. But I think you've just got to try and put your faith into it as best as you can.
Yeah, they say the lines are correct and everything is fine. There are one or two more cameras because it's a Sky game. But look, if we can't trust the lines, even although the Kelly game, I think it was, when we thought that Frankie Kent's boot still further enough back to maybe or maybe not play the Kelly player on. This one, as far as the actual foul is concerned, Laurie, a good friend of ours, Des Roach, the former referee, Grade One referee, I messaged him, and I'm trying to find, as Scott was saying, I'm trying to find any little reasons the touch by Hay that kind of took him away from goal. This was what Des said. It's a foul, it's a red card. The recovering defender cannot use his arms, and it's a shot on goal if no foul occurs, unfortunately. It is what it is, and Craig Gordon comes on, Claudio Braga goes off. First thing he has to do is make a save. I love the backing that Derek McIntosh gave him afterwards. He says, "Aye, I could have saved that." But to go in at half time and to regroup, it maybe wasn't a bad time for it to happen if it was going to happen, because it gave Derek McInnes the chance to sort things out, to make another change with Steinvender coming on for Altona. And it also gave Craig Gordon 15 minutes at half time to get warmed up.
Yeah, I think with the goal, I've not seen the kind of full build up properly, and I've not seen any angles of the line, so I don't want to make any statements about should it be an offside or not. I think I said to you guys when the flag first went up, I was nervous at the game because I didn't think it looked like Yogan who went through from the flick. I thought he looked like he was definitely on because it looked like Finlay had taken a kind of step back. It was poor by Finlay. It's unlike him because that's his kind of bread and butter, long ball over the top, attack it. And I think he does get too distracted by the claim for offside. He's kind of still putting his arm up afterwards. Um, and it's not good from Schwolo. I think either in those moments you hang back and you kind of call the attacker's bluff and say, I'm going to stay on my line, try and beat me, or you fully commit to coming out, and he kind of starts to fully commit, and then at the edge of the box, he doesn't even actually tackle the Dundee player. He kind of just stops and gets in his way. So it does look a bit ridiculous in the end, but I'm in agreement, unfortunately. If we take the offside fact out of it, and I don't want to commit on it because I just haven't seen anything where I can say one way or the other. If he's onside, it's a red card because although this defender's getting back, as Scott says, the defenders can't make a save. They can try and block it. So that I think the wording's always a clear goal scoring opportunity. So that's pretty clear. He may well not score. I think some people try and make the argument, but he might not score. He might not score, but people might not score an open goal from
Hence the word
5 yards.
opportunity.
It's an opportunity to score. So in the same way that people get lost, the last man thing, you can be last man and it not be a red card. You can have five players back and it is a red card. You've got to judge the situation, which I think is correct. You judge it on how good the chance is. And that's what I said at halftime to a few guys. I was like, look, the way I look at it is if that was the other end, I'd be wanting the Dundee player sent off, in all honesty. I think that's so I get why they came to that decision. The offside is one of those where it's part of it comes down to the poor VAR we have here, which Scott's alluded to as well, that so many offsides, and I've highlighted it. I think I came on here, maybe highlighted it. The Motherwell and Kilmarnock games we had recently, where I thought the one we got against Motherwell, that the goal was disallowed. I thought it looked less offside than Bruce Anderson's goal. When he was the goal that he got against us for Kilmarnock. When I looked at the angles,
Yeah.
it looked like he was further ahead of our defenders than the Motherwell player was. So you could say that evens itself out in a way, but I'm just never convinced by the lines with our offside system, unfortunately. And the angles, like Scott says, you're not even getting along the side of the pitch. It's you're drawing lines and you don't necessarily know at what point that pitch, you kind of sometimes you're relying on the grass, but then you're relying on the grass being dead even in terms of how they've cut it. And it's always a bit messy. I think, with offsides. And that's what we get with budget VAR. But from timing point of view, you asked about, yeah, if it's going to happen, I think the worst case scenario there is they score from the free kick because then the whole game's different. If Dundee get a goal from that free kick, then we're losing that game. In all honesty, there's no way that we've not got anything to hold on to. I know we're level, but Dundee are going to go that second half with a spring in their step. We're going to have our heads down. So it's very important we then get to half time. I think once you get to half time, I wasn't confident, but because of who we've got in charge and because of the kind of group of players we've got, in some ways I thought this might work in our favour in a bizarre sense that at 1-0, I don't think I want us to kind of sit in and try and soak up this game. The fans will get nervy, but because we were down to 10, I think the fans got behind the team very quickly because they knew this was just going to be a battle. This was dig in, do anything you can. It does not matter how well you do in the final third. It doesn't matter what you do on the wall. This is about what you do off it. And I think we were superb, which you'll get to in the second half. So I think that timing is crucial, but it's mainly important that you don't concede from that set piece because
Mhm.
that changes the complexion. That game ends 3-1 Dundee probably if they score from that free kick. So like I said, although it was quite routine for Craig to save the free kick, um, it's still quite important for him to get that ball away with his first touch, having not played a club game since last season. So I think that was important for him as well. And it was, yeah, um, you've always got to be ready, don't you, for any of these circumstances? And thankfully, Craig was.
So Hearts went in at the break, leading by 1-0, a goal up, but a man down when we come back. The second half discussed from Dens Park. So Scott McIntosh, a change at the break. Steinwender comes on for Altena and plays it right back. It was something I was thinking about in the build-up to this game. I think the majority of games, Altena is going to start at right back. But I think when we're up against it, maybe away from home, not necessarily in games like Dundee, but if we're down to 10 men or we're playing at Celtic Park or Ibrox, I'm not going to be surprised if I see Steinwender on the team sheet ahead of Altona. So that substitution at halftime made sense to me. What about you?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think you could see even in the first half that Altona was somebody who they were sort of aiming for. They were trying to play a lot of their game down that left-hand side. And he'd had a bit of a sort of shaky first 5 minutes where he doesn't really stop that initial cross going in. But I felt after that, he'd actually played the game reasonably well from that point onwards. But it makes sense as a change. I think again today highlighted that I, I've got a huge problem with fullbacks who can't stop cross balls going in. And I get that McInnes's idea, especially when we went to the back five, would have been it's fine if they cross the ball and we'll be able to cope with it. But I'm quite uneasy with just how much space we were giving them down the sides. And I would like my fullback to be a little bit more engaged and a bit closer in those types of one-on-one scenarios. Uh, Possibly because this game comes reasonably hot off the heels of that game at Easter Road a few weeks ago, where again we just don't do enough to sort of stop those balls coming in, and again that was down that right hand side. Steinwender comes on and he does do relatively well, but him and Magnuson, there wasn't really. I think that's down to Magnuson more than it is Steinwender, but they weren't really covering for each other well. There was a few times where Steinwender's making that first attempt at contact and Magnuson's way behind the play, not covering for the player getting past Steinwender. And there was a point even towards the end of the game where even Kabori was making that point. Kabori was having to say to Magnuson, you have to cover that. You have to get in behind Steinwender in case he doesn't win that first tackle. So, yeah, I was still a bit disappointed at stages with that. But I think once we went to a five, it was slightly less of an issue because we had that extra body in there. But at times during that first sort of 20, 25 minutes, I felt that as much as it's fine having Halkett and Finlay in there sort of heading everything away, ultimately, and that was proven with the chance to go towards the end, one of them is going to find a Dundee player eventually, and that's what happened. So yeah, it's something again, I've mentioned this before about fullbacks. It's not just a Hearts problem; it's a fucking modern day fullback problem. There's fullbacks who move for millions and millions of pounds that don't know how to stop the ball for going into the box, and for some reason it's just something that doesn't seem to get highlighted now by coaches. It just seems to be accepted. So, but it was the right sub. It's a gamble. I think bringing Braga off was a gamble because I think in some Hearts fans' minds, when you're under the cosh, you want there to be legs in the final third to be able to maybe try and turn their defenders and just get us a bit of territory in their sort of half of the pitch for the second half. So I think the changes McIntosh make today are the types of brave decisions that can still go against you at times. So although it might be the right call, it's still small margins on whether it works out well for you today, and thankfully it did for him.
Here's some quotes from Derek McInnes. He said afterwards, I think a lot of people would have been questioning us at half-time, thinking this might be where Hearts run out of steam. We had to do so much right. Down to 10 men on a heavy pitch, everyone had to do 1.5 jobs. We spoke about that at halftime, and everybody did it to the letter. We got our reward. Braga's goal felt like an eternity ago, but Claudio's goal gave us something to hang on to, and I don't think anyone could deny us the win. He also spoke about Magnuson and Devlin kind of having to cover and play two positions, their own position and the kind of right and left side of where they were, hence talking about 1.5 jobs. And Laurie, we had Steinvender, a centre back, playing at right back. We had McCart, a centre back, playing at left back. We had Magnuson, central midfielder, playing on the right hand side. We had Devlin, a central midfielder, covering the left hand side. The second half, I just thought it was, I thought it was a brilliant performance for what we were asked to do. And they knew, or Hearts knew, that Dundee were going to get a lot of the ball. And we were content to do that. Scott's talking about stopping the cross. There comes a time when if you've got a man more, you can double team, and they tried a lot of that. Whether it was is it Yogain on one side and Congreve on the other. It was mainly down Hart's right side, Dundee's left, and there were balls in, but a lot of them were overhit. A lot of passes from Dundee went astray. But I just thought in that second half, I was nervous watching it, but I had trust in our defence. Even Frankie Kent headed it the right way on a number of occasions. I just thought we were outstanding to a man defensively, 5 centre backs, and I thought in that second half, yeah, they had the chance late on, but up until that chance, I thought we were brilliant defensively, Laurie.
Yeah, the pedant in me wants to say that, well, for the outfield players, it's uh, what 1 1/10 you're kind of having to do if there's one player less. But I know I the point is sound. Yeah, I think they were superb. I think Scott makes a good point about the one of the things that was I don't know if you noticed it. You maybe not didn't notice it from where Scott was, but Magnuson, when they came over and doubled up, he kept pointing at Yogan to go on the outside, to go on the outside. And then he kept going on the outside and then going past them both. And I, I wasn't sure if it was by
I
design,
definitely think Magnuson was concussed. I mean, he was running about like Basil Fawlty with that headband on at
but
stages.
like
Like,
Yogan is left-footed, so I would have thought they would have been trying to force him
yeah,
inside on his weaker foot because obviously he wanted to go on the outside to get on. And I did think we'd let him get too many crosses in, but at the same time, when you've got Halkett in there and Findlay in there, and then later on Frankie Kent, he's okay head right in the right direction when he's defending, he just can't head right in the right direction when he's attacking. So I did get confused by that because, in fairness, with McCart, I felt at the other side he was trying to stop Congreve getting in on his left foot. He wanted to get inside, and that's where to be fair, that's where the cross for Aqua comes in, where the great save from Craig
Mm.
Gordon. But I felt like McCart was trying to stop him going in more often. Whereas on our side, I was a bit confused at times because Steinwender was getting beaten quite easily, and it kind of felt like Magnuson was taking up a position to stop him coming in. But I was like, but he's going to want to go out on the left. He's left-footed. He's constantly want to go on the left. So should we not just force him inside? Would that not be better on his weaker foot? But look, it worked, and everyone put in a shift. Where maybe some players didn't play as well as others, but everyone did work very hard, and it does. It keep going back to that game that Kamara beat us in. And I feel like maybe the Dundee fans kind of felt like this. I know they got that big chance at the end, but kind of halfway through that second half, maybe even before, you just got the feeling like this Hearts team aren't going to give you much. Maybe not anything here because you're getting the ball out wide and you're getting crosses into the box. But they've now got three centre backs in the area, and they got two other centre backs who can also come in the area if they need to as well. So it was a very Derek McInnes kind of second half, and like,
Hmm.
you can be playing in fine margins because, like I say, like that chance at the end of the first half of the free kick, which could get deflected in, doesn't even need to be a moment of skill. And we're defending that deep, and the other team have that much of the ball. It can be something that is out of your control. It can just be someone decides to take a whack from 20 yards, hits off someone, loops on the other side of the goal and goes in, or it's a stramash from a corner. So it's fine margins because you can defend brilliantly for that entire 45 plus minutes, and it can just be a moment of either magic or just or misfortune that goes against you. So that's why I think playing like that, it can't work every week, but in positions like that, going down the man, I think it was absolutely fantastic. And I think I hope that, not that we needed it because we're top of the league, but I think that'll hopefully give a big boost to everyone because we kind of got over the line against Livy, but second half was nervy. We got beat by Hibs and it was disappointing. So I'm almost looking for a new bit of momentum from Hearts in terms of actually
Hmm.
like not blowing teams away every week. It's never going to happen, but actually like let's be the team in control. That's why I'm hoping against St Mirren. Obviously, if we get a 1-0 win, I'm still going to be happy. But I'm hoping against St Mirren we kind of put a marker down to show this team hasn't kind of we're not running out of ideas. We have a third wind maybe are we at about now in this season, and we can start performing again and being the team setting the tone in matches. So I'm very pleased, and I'm hoping it will kind of catapult us on a little bit as well because we've got a really big run of games coming up after, especially after the St Mirren and the Cup game.
I think that's a really good point, Scott, that Laurie's just said. Livy can be the end of one chapter, and Dundee away can be the start of another one. And I'm going to read you more Derek McInnes quotes in a second, but he was also talking afterwards about how he feels that Hearts fans, will now be desperate to get to Tynecastle, to welcome the players home after that, to get them up. And we're all going to speak about this in a special podcast over the next couple of days involving BBC and other Hearts podcasts and the evening news and Hearts Standard and everything else like that about the atmosphere and how to improve it at Tynecastle. But one of Derek McInnes's comments afterwards was that should really ensure that we generate a great atmosphere at kickoff for the St Mirren game, which is vitally important. So I think that could easily be the first game of a new chapter in Hearts' season, as Laurie speaks about. The other thing I wanted to mention regarding Derek McInnes's comments, and we've spoken about a back five. We kind of only went to a back five in the 70th minute when Frankie Kent came on along with Kabori for Kizaridis and Shankland. And Scott, talk to me about Derek McInnes's reactionary subs in a good way this season. Sometimes instead of making a change, he'll just wait if he sees that the opposition are about to make a change. Let's see what they're going to do before deciding what he wants to do. And he said, as soon as Simon Murray came on, we wanted to make them go round us. When it's 2v1 in the box, you feel comfortable. But we told Frankie to get ready and be ready to come on if Simon Murray came on to get ready. We had to use a stoppage to get Braga off after the red card, and you don't want to be left with just one stoppage with so long to go. So that's why we made the double change with Kabori and Kent. That gave us essentially five centre backs. We kept a flat three in midfield. Cammy and Thomas had to keep jumping out to the sides, which takes a huge amount of work. But it meant Dundee had to move the ball really quickly to get overloads, and I don't think they managed that. How much credit for Derek McInnes for his substitutions and his game management in the second half?
Yeah, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that substitution because anyone who was at the game could see that Frankie Kent had been pretty much warming up from the start of the second half onwards. So I think there was always going to be an intention of introducing him into the game. But as you've mentioned there, it was based upon what Dundee were going to do first. So that all kind of ties in together. I don't think he's saying that and just waffling for the sake of it because it all worked out for him. I think if you see just how much warming up Frankie Kent was doing in that second half, you could see that there was always an intent to probably bring him on it at some stage if we still had a 1-0 goal lead to defend. So that makes sense. I thought the Kabori change was quite good as well. That was an interesting one. I felt because Kimbangu had been at the club a bit longer, there may have been more trust in him to have played a bit more of a disciplined role. Not so much being a maverick forward, but having to work for the team. But to be fair to Kabore, he actually got stuck in. He tracked back. he tried to do what he could with the little scraps that he got in the final third. And I thought that his performance was one of the more surprising aspects of today because I feel like we've not really seen a lot of Kabore in his natural position. You know, he has started quite a few games playing out wide on the right, but it was interesting to see how he done today. I think a lot of fans would have been surprised to see Laurie Shankland coming off so early in a game, but the change worked. Kabore was that sort of unknown quantity that was just unsettling their defenders just enough so that they weren't really getting a proper foothold on the game. You know, everything was then having to go long in that because he was sort of occupying them. So every substitution worked in that sense. And it's not the first time we've said that about McInnes. I think we can count on one hand the amount of times where we've maybe been a bit disappointed or miffed maybe with some of the decisions he's made. But on the whole, his in-game management, particularly in the second half of games, has been really impressive this season.
Yeah, Gordon Stitt sent us a message on Twitter saying what management by Dell. Craig Gordon could easily have left on loan to get games before the World Cup like Xander did on Friday, but no, Dell's man management keeps Craig Gordon, and we get that today. What a moment. Let's talk about it, Laurie. And in your commentary, you kind of surmised and suggested probably 4 minutes of added time. I was delighted when I saw it was only going to be three. And I've watched it back, and the clock has struck the 93rd minute. And remember, it's a minimum of, and I think Dundee made a substitution in that added time. So there was always going to be a little bit of extra. Ball comes in from the right hand side. They've just brought on Aqua, who's a handful, and I'm surprised they didn't bring him on beforehand, given that they were trying to put crosses or Hearts or trying to force them to get crosses into the box. He meets it. I don't think he could have met it any better. I don't think he could have headed it any better. And Craig makes the save. You saw what it meant to him. You saw what it meant to his teammates afterwards. It wasn't a couple of minutes more after the final whistle. They were still celebrating with him. What could this do for Hearts? We spoke about potentially being the first game of a new chapter. Going forward, could we look back on this game as the key game for Hearts this season?
We could. There could be a lot that we look back on. I feel like what might end up being forgotten about, if Hearts did the incredible this season, we're probably going to have some bigger moments, I would say, in the maybe after the top six split, and we might start forgetting about a win against Dundee in January. But I think it certainly would have to be up there. And I think whatever happens this season, it was a brilliant moment. And to be honest, looking at the league, we kind of had to get over the line in this game. I feel like given Celtic have Martin O'Neill back and they got a win. Rangers won again. Unfortunately, sounded pretty routine against Aberdeen this afternoon. So just to maintain that gap at the top, and we go into that big Wednesday night. We've got a chance against St Mirren to make sure we are 6 points clear of both teams. Obviously, we're only three ahead of Rangers, but we have that game in hand. So I think it's a big moment. Like I say, context is going to be key because if Hearts win the league, then it will still be people will think about that save in this moment as much bigger. If Hearts don't win the league, then it'll maybe just go down as a fantastic save that won Hearts a game in a good season, but not an incredible season. But I think it was brilliant just because apart from anything, Craig Gordon is kind of there's always another chapter, and you don't know how there's another chapter. I don't know how there keeps being added chapters when you think he's sort of he's not that he's run his race, but you think his Hearts career is kind of starting to maybe peter out, or he's got an injury, he keeps coming back, and even now, he's obviously the first pick for Scotland right now, and I think that it's his place to lose. But club wise, you kind of you think this is Alexander Schwolo's position to lose, and there's no reason, to be fair to him, until that, there's no really reason to drop him. I know he had the blunder against Kilmarnock, but I think every keeper is going to have those odd moments. So I think until today, there'd be no reason to put Craig Gordon in, quite frankly. And that's nothing against Craig Gordon. That's just because we've had a keeper who's been playing very well every week. He's now going to get at least one more league game this season for Hearts. And it's an interesting situation, actually, because Craig Gordon plays against St Mirren. I'm hoping he won't be too busy, but if he has a clean sheet, plays well enough, we've then got a cup game against Falkirk. Now, I don't know what Derek McInnes' thinking was. I know a lot of managers like to keep their second choice goalkeeper happy by playing them in the cups. Whether McInnes would have done that or not, I don't know. What's going to be interesting is then after the St Mirren game, who plays against Falkirk, and then is that just because it's the cup, or is that now because Craig Gordon is in a position to lose that number one spot? So it's an interesting conundrum, I would say, for Derek McInnes because Alexander Schwolo has been fantastic this season for Hearts, but I thought he made a real mess of that moment. It wasn't just an unfortunate red card where maybe he's been hung out to dry by his defenders, albeit Finlay should have done better. I thought he didn't commit properly. He either should stay on his line, he should commit to coming out. He did kind of something in between. It was clumsy. Um, so he has to take a bit of blame as well, Stuart Finlay. So that's where I think there's an interesting conundrum here for McInnes after St Mirren. If assuming Craig has a decent game against St Mirren, does nothing wrong, who plays in the cup game, and then is that just because it's a cup game, or has he got a bigger decision to be made? And I know that Scott is just delighted that I'm throwing a goalkeeper decision back into this after Xander Clark just left on loan to Doncaster Rovers.
I think it's one of those where because of how the suspension works out for Swallow, where it doesn't actually kick in until the Celtic game. I think you probably have to look at it in terms of
Sorry, that's a good point actually.
I think you probably have to look at it in terms of Craig Gordon probably needs to play the next couple of games just to make sure that he's match fit and ready for that really important Celtic match. So I'd be loath to sort of see Swallow come back in as much as I think he's done a decent job since he's came into the club. I think Gordon, with that performance today, I think he earns the right to play against St Mirren and Falkirk, and then, we'll see what happens after the Celtic game and where we are at the end of the month. But I think for me, Gordon needs to play those two games, even just from the point of view of making sure that he's fully up to speed by the time we play Celtic. Because let's be honest, well, he'll have work to do that day.
Is it a conundrum, as Laurie suggests, or is it quite straightforward that when Schwallo's available again and we're back in league action, assuming Craig's in goal for the cup, that the man who was in possession automatically gets his jersey back, Scott? Or, as Laurie was suggesting, might there be a decision to make for Mr. McInnes?
I don't think there's enough body of work or evidence there to say that Swallow have just come straight back in.
Hmm.
You've got to remember he's only been at the club matter of about 4 months himself, I think, and we all joked about this for the first 4 or 5 games. It was very hard to judge whether he was actually a good keeper or not because he had so little to do during that initial spell. I think he has done reasonably well, but I mean, Craig's come in and made that save today, and look, there's still elements of Craig's game that I think will undoubtedly frustrate us a tiny bit on Wednesday. I'm sure, the distribution will always be a bit of an issue, but if he's providing those types of saves in pivotal moments for you, you'll take the odd sort of downside to his game as well. So for me, it now becomes a case of Swallow's had that moment. It's now Craig's jersey to lose. If he does well against St Mirren, Falkirk and Celtic, it then becomes a case of he has the jersey until McInnes has a decision to make. I don't think he needs to bring Swallow back in too early. I think as long as it looks as if Gordon and the centre halves are communicating well enough, I suppose an argument could be made by some fans that Swallow is maybe a bit more adept at playing that sort of sweeper keeper role that I think managers quite like their keepers to play now. So that would maybe be a plus point for Swallow, but I think it's a tough one, but it's a good problem to have, like many of the problems we've got with the squad now. But I'd be keeping Craig in there for the next 2 games because I just think it's good for continuity reasons to have him having played in our couple of matches before the Celtic match where he does have to play.
Is
Laurie, I'd
the
love to say we're both neutral. But anybody watching this will see you have a Craig Gordon signed shirt behind you on your error, and I've got a Craig Gordon signed shirt behind me on the wall. So our loyalties are obviously clear. Who gets the gloves now? Is it Craig's to lose?
Just one quick point, is it not the I thought it was the Mirren game that Schwolo be suspended for because it's a straight red card for denying a great goal scorer
It
in the
is.
history now. It is that, isn't it?
It's the next
Oh,
game.
is it not the seven?
No, no,
So
I
is it
think
not the
that's only for
7 day
No, no,
thing?
no.
accumulation of
That's a
yellows.
yellow card thing.
Ah,
That's the
right,
yellows.
okay.
Just
Right,
to
that's where
just
I'm
to
getting
clarify,
mixed
you
up
threw
then.
me there slightly, but I was like, I'm sure because it's a straight red, it's just next game.
And it's not
Um,
violent conduct, so it's not 3 games.
no,
He'll
no,
miss
it's just
St
one
Mirren.
game next game, so he will be.
Yeah.
He'll.
And
That's
then
why.
it's Falkirk in the
So
cup, and then
I'm going to
Celtic
blame
after that.
Scott for that. He threw me there a bit. But I was like, I'm sure it's next
Apologies,
game.
apologies,
So,
getting
It's
mixed up there.
okay.
so I still think it's an interesting. It is an interesting conundrum, and I'm torn on it. And part of it is the sort of romanticism of Craig Gordon constantly coming back, and Craig Gordon being Craig Gordon and being the best keeper that Scotland's produced and the best, possibly the best player that Hearts have produced. He is not the same Craig Gordon that he once was. That's not for debate, but I mean he still can pull off those big saves. So um, I don't know. I'm not going to give an answer to it because I don't know. I think it's just a tricky one for McInnes because if he does play well against St Mirren, um, and then he plays him against Falkirk, for instance, he plays well again. Is it unfair if he then does that to then take him out for the Celtic game? Um, I suppose one of my issues would potentially be that Falkirk slightly, and maybe and more so with Celtic, is what Svolo does with the ball, and I think Celtic will certainly press us more, and Falkirk will definitely try to press us more than what St Mirren will do. Um, Svolo's distribution is definitely better than Craig Gordon's. I don't think that's up for debate too much. I think I said this to someone after the derby. I wasn't on this podcast, but that third Hibs goal, albeit a decent strike, part of me said afterwards, like, I wonder if Craig Gordon can maybe get a wee fingertip on that because it's the type of thing he does, even at 43. He can sometimes pull off saves, and he
He's
thinks
got a larger frame than Swallow, eh?
he
Like
does, he does.
Swallow, for all his upside, he, even if you wanted to make an argument about him having the same reflex capability as Craig Gordon's just got the frame that gets him
He
to that
does.
ball today. And so
Yeah.
I think it's a fair point to make.
So I think my concern, especially for the Celtic game, would possibly be how it affects our overall game. And if you're Celtic, you look at that and you think, can we take advantage of the fact that maybe they can't use the keeper as much as they can? Because if they're using the keeper, it's maybe going out of play or it's not picking out a defender because Svolo's kicking's pretty good on the whole. And I don't think Greg's kicking is bad. I don't want to say that because he'll never speak to me again. But I think Svolo's kicking is better. So that's where I'd be slightly concerned with the Celtic game. Could it affect us when we're on the ball? Off the ball, big moments, I'd still rely on, if the ball's flying at the bottom corner, Craig's still my man to try and save that and tip it around. So
Mm.
I just think it's a tricky one. I'm more interested to see how Derek handles it. I don't have the answer because I'd probably sway towards Craig like you, Mark, but then it might be you've got your blue glasses on, it might be the maroon glasses. You've got the glasses to go with that Craig Gordon shirt behind you, you're matching. So
It,
yeah, I don't have an answer. There's me just talking and not giving you an answer. That was very Mark Donaldson way to reply.
Yeah, it was, and I get that, and I don't think you can give a definite answer because it depends what happens in the St Mirren game. You got to remember as well, Swallow made that really good save against Livy from Teti Yengi late on. It's not a case of saying, well, Craig would or wouldn't have made that save. Yes, he probably would have. Bigger picture for me, we've got two really good goalkeepers, and whoever we pick, I think we're in a really good position regarding our goalkeeping situation. So, by the way, Old Firm Facts used to be on Twitter, now on Instagram, said, pundit slams 93-year-old Craig Gordon. Yes, but he's slow off his line after wonder save in 2075-76 title race. What a save it was. And that ensured, right at the death, that Hearts left Dens Park with all 3 points. The biggest win of the season, according to manager Derek McInnes. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest, Hepburn and McDonald's Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. Okay, let's wrap this one up. Just a few more days, and then it's St Mirren at Tynecastle. We will park the debate on the atmosphere for a while. It's also difficult to know what team is going to be selected, Scott, because afterwards, Derek McInnes said we'll see with regards to Harry Milne and Stephen Kingsley. What kind of opposition do St Mirren present us in a home game rather than a trip to Paisley this midweek?
It's a bit of a funny one. St Mirren, they don't have their troubles to seek in terms of injury problems of their own. They've had a multitude of various injuries to key players in the midfield, hence why they signed Alan Campbell on a short-term deal. The only issue with that is that Alan Campbell hasn't had a club since last summer, after his last short-term deal with Dundee United came to an end, so it's difficult to know just how match fit he will be. Uh, Shamal George came off with an injury during the second half yesterday. He's had a good season for them. Ryan Millen, who came on for him, is a championship keeper, I would probably say. So there's reasons why we should be going into this feeling quite confident that we're maybe getting St Mirren at quite a good time. They have suffered somewhat of a hangover since winning the League Cup. Uh, they're still a team that you think could get a bit of a heady steam and maybe still push for a sixth place finish. But yeah, they're definitely not firing on all cylinders just now. Yeah, we might have one or two areas ourselves where we maybe have to sort of think about it and maybe be a bit creative with our problem solving around that as well. But I'm quite confident going into Wednesday. I do think it may be a fixture where the first goal doesn't come early. And I think, again, that word that we've used before about the home crowd, I think patience is possibly going to be required. But I do think it's still a game that we can still see out by a couple of goals. It just might not happen as early as maybe we would want it to be.
I said right at the start, Laurie, about blood pressure medication and being put through the ringer. Well, we don't want, we can't do that. Well, none of us will survive if it's every single game. Hopefully, it's 3 points. I'd love it to be comfortable in midweek. Hearts at home have played 10, won 7 and drawn 3 this season. St Mirren away have played 9, won 1, drawn 2 and lost 6. When the sides previously met earlier this season, it was a 2-all draw in a contentious game in Paisley. They also met in the League Cup with St Mirren going through on penalties. Hearts last played St Mirren at Tynecastle in February and won by 3 goals to 1. What are we expecting for this one against the Saints, as Scott said, who maybe aren't in the form that Stephen Robinson would like?
Oh no, I mean they've lost their last three, and I don't think they've scored. I think they've scored one goal. I think in 4 games, so they've got a lot of struggles. And Scott highlights their injury problems as well. Phillips, Donnelly, and Shamal George, I think, all went off and have been ruled out. I think they had likes of O'Hara, Ayunga, Bacchus are already injured. So I think Stephen Robinson's highlight. I think there's like 7 players who would potentially start for them who are out. The downside is Alex Gogic returns from suspension, who turns into
Pirlo.
Pirlo.
yeah, Beckenbauer, Pirlo, whatever you want to say, he always turns into these top players when he plays us. But I think St Mirren are in a bad position, and whilst St Mirren are a tough team for us in Paisley, they don't actually fare very well at Tynecastle. I think they've won once in the last 11. That was the game that basically signalled the end for Robbie Nielsen. So we tend to dispatch them at Tynecastle fairly routinely, and I think I know this is typical kind of asking for sound bites to be taken after we lose 1-0, but I think this will be pretty comfortable. I think St Mirren are in bad form. They're going through a tough patch. They were missing a few key players from their team. I'm delighted that Kelly Phillips won't be in there. I'm delighted that Shamal George won't be in there because although I don't know much about the goalkeeper, I think Shamal George is actually a pretty decent stopper at this level, and
Mhm.
I'd like to think we're going to have a bit of pressure and we'll have a few pops at goal. So I think it'll be one that we're going to win routinely, and I would like to see Alexander Skizoridis get back on the score sheet. He's actually went 12 without a goal now, and I don't think
Really?
yeah, since the Celtic
Wow.
game he's not scored. So I would like to see him testing out the credentials of their, as Scott highlights, a championship keeper, having a few pops in, cutting from the left. So yeah, I'm very confident in this game. I think especially after the Dundee game. And I know you're going to have your podcast on the atmosphere. I don't think I'll be on that one, but just to mention, it's something that I definitely felt in the Livy game. And I thought the fans did okay at points. They tried to stay behind the team, but the nerves shone through. And I think if Hearts are to do the unthinkable this season, I think we need the fans just to try and put that aside. As difficult as it is, because I would have done the same thing probably a few years ago when I was in the stands. But we just need to try and back the team because players different players in different areas have spoken about how that does feed onto the pitch. And even more key is the opposition. We know from managers have said this. We know, I mean, even Ryan talked about it was at St Johnstone. I think Levine said it, you know, just frustrate them. The crowd will get on top of them. They don't like it when even if they're winning, if it's not comfortable against a team like this. So opposition managers highlight this, that if you get the fans nervy, it feeds onto the pitch. It gives the opposition more incentive. So I think it's maybe only a 5% thing, but if we're holding on to a game, I think it gives that players a real boost if the fans are just right behind them constantly. And it maybe gives the opposition a second thought about it. Oh, we can't kind of get this crowd to turn. They're just going to back them whatever happens here. So I think it's a big thing for me, and I'm hoping. I don't think it'll be a big thing on Wednesday, but I think in other games, so if we go behind when we play Celtic here later in the month, I hope we do what I've seen in games on the continent sometimes, which is the fans react by getting louder and backing their team because they know they're behind, they're up against it. Let's give them a boost. Let's not give the opposition a boost. Let's drown out the away fans. We're behind, but let's get right behind them.
Hmm.
Goes 2-0 even. Hopefully it doesn't, but in fact, let's get behind them even more. So I think it's a big thing, and it's not a criticism because I think it's actually largely a UK football culture that's what fans do. They like to have a grump and a moan and get on the team's
Look
back
at
and
the
have a boo.
atmosphere at the Arsenal Liverpool game the other
Aye,
night. It was
so
Unreal.
flat.
Yeah.
I don't think it's specifically Hearts or anything, or even just Scotland. But if we can add that little extra, I think, if it comes to fine margins, I think it could be the difference. But as for Wednesday, comfortable. 3-0 Hearts, Kizurides on the score sheet. There you go.
Okay, before we get Scott's prediction, Hearts have scored 9 goals in the last 3 home games against St Mirren, a 2, a 3, and a 4. Albeit, we went behind the last time Saints were in Gorgie in February last year when Mandron scored after 37 minutes. James Wilson, Callum Neuenhoff, and then Kenneth Vargas eventually after a VAR check in stoppage time. What's your scoreline and a goal scorer, Scotty, please?
Yeah, I'm going to go with 2-0 Hearts. I think it is going to be, I think we'll be comfortable in possession, but it might take a bit of time just to break them down. But I think it'll ultimately be a reasonably comfortable night for us. I'm going to go for 2-0, and I'm going to go with Kabori coming off the bench and getting one of the goals.
Okay. I will say, I'll make it nervy, get that blood pressure medication on back order. 1-0 Hearts, Kizarides with the goal. Claudio Braga got the only goal of the game at Dens Park, but a 43-year-old by the name of Craig Sinclair Gordon came to Hearts' rescue and ensured the 3 points were heading back down the M90 to Gorgie. Dundee nil, Hearts 1. Thanks for your company. Bye for now.